panel on agribusiness and land grabbing. My name is Nina Moses and I work at ActionAid USA. I am joined today by I-Kysseline Cherestal, also from ActionAid USA, Bahati Jack from the Africa Faith and Justice Network, and Jahi Chappell from the Institute for Agriculture and Food Policy. Just to open up this session, I first wanted to thank you all for joining us today to discuss agribusiness and land grabbing, a growing trend impacting impoverished communities all over the world, particularly in Africa, which is why we wanted to discuss it in the context of the African Leaders Summit. This panel will cover the drivers of this particular form of irresponsible and unsustainable development and the ways it threatens food security and livelihoods. We'll explore the communities affected by land grabbing, cast a light on the actors driving this movement, and the subsequent fallout. We'll also discuss sustainable solutions such as agroecology and public investment alternatives. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the rest of our panel, starting to my right and going down. If you all wouldn't mind saying hello, discussing where the organization you're with and why you're here today.
Hello everyone. I have the dubious role of going first, which has its advantage and its shortcomings, so I'm just going to focus on the advantages right now, which is that you get to hear everything fresh, and then you get to forget about it very quickly. So I'm I-Kysseline Cherestal, and I am a senior policy analyst at ActionAid USA. I am based in Washington, D.C., and ActionAid is a large federation of we work in about 46 countries, and we have a human rights-based approach to development. That is that we think that human rights are the core of any type of development process that needs to take place in a country. The right to food, the right to livelihoods, the right to housing. These are some very basic human rights that are enshrined in international agreements that most countries have agreed to, including the United States. And we believe that they should be the drivers, they should be the objectives of any type of US policy and programs in any country, including in Africa. So my role will be to talk to you about our latest report, which is called the Great Land Heist, and it was produced with ActionAid International. So the Federation played a key role in producing that report, and I was one of the contributors to the report along with other colleagues in the US and elsewhere. And this is really, it's nothing new. It's basically a way of memorializing the ways in which donors, donor governments, and multinationals are playing a key role in driving land grabs around the world, particularly in Africa. So I am going to give you a brief overview of that report. I'm going to talk about an initiative that the US is taking a strong leadership in, but it is, again, an international initiative called the New Alliance. Some of you may have heard about it. It's a G8 initiative that was born in 2012 that is also playing a key role in land grabs around the world. And we will talk about what is it that we can do to help change these policies so that Africa can really benefit from these international relationships that it is striving to make with the United States.
I am Bahati Jack. I am a policy analyst with the Africa Faith and Justice Network, and I'm very pleased to be here. My portion of the presentation will be just to give you a case study from Cameroon and what is happening as far as one of the American companies involved in the land grab, what they are doing, and what the victims are going through. Thank you.
And I'm Jahi Chappell. I'm Director of Agroecology and Agriculture Policy at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy based in Minneapolis. IATP, broadly speaking, looks to connect policy and practice and the science that's already out there that shows we have a lot of alternatives that are validated and could really work. So I'm a recovering academic. I've only been at IATP for a little bit less than a year, so I'm still trying to think more in practical terms. It's always intimidating with people who are actually doing the work rather than just talking about doing the work. But I'm going to talk a little bit about, I would say, the scientific evidence-based, to use the catchphrases, proof that there are alternatives and that they really do work and can work for people, scientifically speaking.
Thank you. So Kysseline, would you like to start on the land heist?
Great. So just to give you a little bit of context, for millions of people living in the world's poorest countries, access to land is a matter not of wealth, but of survival, of identity, of belonging. Most of the 1.4 billion people who earn less than $1.25 a day live in rural areas, and they depend on their land for their food and for their livelihoods. Smallholder farmers, pastoralist societies, forest dwellers, and fishermen and women all rely directly on the land and its natural resources for their livelihoods. In the wake of the 2007-2008 food crisis, we saw a very large and dramatic increase in land deals. And as demand for agricultural land intensified, it slowed down in 2010, but the overall trend remains. What we are seeing is an increase by governments, by agribusiness investors, and by the financial sector to acquire land in low-income countries, whatever the price to the people already using the land and relying on it. They are using it for, the demand for the land is driven by the need for food, for fuel, for fodder, for fiber production, as well as for mining, for tourism, and other investments. More than 1,600 large-scale land deals have been documented since the year 2000, targeting over 60 million hectares of land. We're talking about the size of a country like Spain. The research has shown that these type of land deals are generally characterized by lack of transparency, lack of consultation, and adverse human rights effects. In many instances, these deals are happening with the backing of the host government, international agencies, and multilateral financial institutions. So there might be some confusion out there about what is a land deal versus a land grab. And at ActionAid, and actually a number of other organizations have done a pretty good job of coming up with a definition. So in 2011, in May 2011, a number of governments, international organizations, and civil society groups participated in a major conference on land regulations, and they came up with this definition, which we call which came out of the Tirana Declaration. And they define a land grab as a land deal that meets one of the following criteria: is in violation of human rights, particularly the rights of women. It is not based on the free, prior, and informed consent of the affected land users. It is not based on a thorough assessment, or it is in disregard of social, economic, and environmental impacts, including the way that they are gendered. It is not based on transparent contracts that specify clear and binding commitments about activities, employment, and benefit sharing. And it is not based on effective democratic planning, independent oversight, and meaningful participation. One of the best places to actually understand how many land deals are happening around the world is a database called the Land Matrix. And it is funded by a variety of governments, multilateral organizations, and they have the infrastructure and the finances and the data that is needed to understand where land deals are happening around the world. And as I said, it's called the Land Matrix. And it has its limitations for a number of reasons. I mean, one, even the most comprehensive national studies struggle to determine which land deals are being abandoned, which land deals are continuing on what amount of land. In many cases, when the land deal has been abandoned, it comes back up under a different name with different players, but it is still about the same amount, the same land involving the same communities. But it's not traced as such. The other kind of obstacle or the other constraint about the land matrix is that it only covers land deals that are about 200 hectares or more. And the average land deal actually is about 8,000 hectares, which tells you that there's a large number of land deals that are taking place that are not being recorded. And it also tells you that there are a large number that are less than 200 hectares that are not at all that are completely flying under the radar. But what it does tell us, which is, still something that is very important, is that of the top 10 countries targeted by investors for large-scale land deals, 6 of them are in Africa: South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Mozambique, Liberia, Sudan, and Sierra Leone. And other prominent, targets include, Indonesia, Brazil, Uruguay, but also Ethiopia, Ghana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania, and others. 41% of these land deals are happening in Africa, followed by Southeast Asia at 32% and Latin America at 19%. As of the end of 2013, the land matrix actually documented that 40 million hectares of land were targeted in Africa. So what we also find to be very interesting is that the land matrix is also showing that the primary country of origin for these deals is the United States at 7.09 million hectares of land, followed by Malaysia. We have the UK in there, and we have China at the very bottom with 1.34 million, kind of putting in perspective the US-China dichotomy and how it plays out in Africa. So what it is finding is that more than half of the land that is being targeted is actually used for crop production by the communities who live in the area. And even what has been deemed empty land has legitimate tenure, legitimate land users. What we mean is people who are pastoralists, who rely on the land on a regular basis to come with their livestock. We're talking about traditional land management techniques where the land is being left unused for a little while for the community to be able to come back to it. We are talking about use of land for ritual, for religion. We're talking about natural forests that provide a source of many essential products to the communities that rely on it. So what are the drivers of land grabs? What we have been able to memorialize in that report is the fact that indeed governments are playing a very key role in effectuating these land deals, either by facilitating and encouraging direct sale and lease to investors, either by backing agricultural investment funds, providing finance to agribusinesses to acquire the land, often without the transparent and accountable mechanisms that are necessary to ensure that the investments do no harm, either through bilateral or multilateral trade agreements that strengthen the rights of foreign investors while failing to also protect the rights of the communities that are relying on that land, and also through biofuel mandates that are pushing investors to go to other parts of the world, such as in Africa, in order to be able to sell the biofuel products to Europe and the United States. And one of the reasons why it is somewhat easy for investors and for donor governments and multilateral and a variety of other players to go into countries in Africa and do this, it's because, there are a couple of reasons. On one hand, smallholder farmers and indigenous communities often lack the legal recognition over their land rights, even if they have resided on it for generations. This makes them susceptible to corrupt land deals and to expropriation without consent, or to fair, or to it makes it so that they're unable to get the level of compensation that they deserve. And what we've also found is that there was a study in 2013 by OXFAM on the relationship between governance and land deals. And the study found that of the 56 countries where large-scale land deals were agreed upon between 2010 and 2011, about an 11-year period, 78% scored below average on 4 key governance indicators used by the World Bank: accountability to citizens, rule of law, quality of the private sector regulation, and control of corruption. The cost of these land grabs is just enormous on the communities that are impacted. Disempowerment, marginalization, eviction, people have to move from the area, people have to lose their source of food and their source of livelihood, human rights violations, not just in terms of right to food and livelihood, but also in terms of the violence that sometimes erupts either between the communities and the government or the force that are evicting them, or between the communities and other communities, because the displacement is pushing more communities that are not used to living together in such a close manner to now have to fend for fewer resources. Women tend to bear the brunt of the impact. I mean, on one hand, they tend to be underrepresented at the negotiation table when such table does exist. In addition to that, they also are the ones who have to care to go for firewood. They are the ones who have to fetch water. They have to walk further away to be able to attend to the needs of their families. And then there's also the social breakdown and the cultural impact of no longer having access to ancestral land or to the land on which they have relied on for so many years. Of course, the most serious flaws of the land deal is that the majority of them is struck in the absence of public scrutiny. The parties to these deals often complete them in secret and overlook the concerns of existing land users who may have lived in the area for generations. One of the initiatives that we have been studying in the U.S., particularly but within ActionAid generally, is the New Alliance. So the New Alliance, some of you may have heard of it, is a set of agreements that was announced by the G8 in 2012 and 2013. And what it does is that it gives large corporations a key role in agricultural development in Africa, and require participating governments to provide incentives to agribusinesses and to expand corporate access to land, to water, to labor, and to markets. There are about 10 African countries right now that are part of the New Alliance: Tanzania, Mozambique, Ghana, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, and Malawi, Nigeria, Benin, and Senegal recently joined as well. And it was negotiated within government and the businesses in the absence of civil society. The New Alliance is not new money. It is basically old money being recycled. They've promised about $5 billion to the New Alliance, and like I said, it's not new money. But interestingly enough, it represents a very drastic reduction in comparison to the $22 billion that the G8 had promised for public investment in agriculture from 2009 to 2012, but has not delivered. Some of the companies that are involved in the New Alliance, we know some of these names very well. We're talking about Yara, DuPont, Syngenta, Monsanto, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, Kraft, Unilever. These are the companies that are involved in the New Alliance. And what we are finding is that, again, as similar initiatives have done, it threatens rural community land and creates social inequity. Some of these countries, actually almost all the countries, are starting what they call land banks, offering land to investors before fully implementing any kind of land governance restructuring it, before fully implementing policies and laws that are going to be protecting the rights of the communities already there, so that these communities are better positioned to negotiate these deals with the investors if they were to show up at their door. It undermines biodiversity and sustainable agriculture. It's actually and what we want to point out is that this doesn't mean that ActionAid is in a position to private investment in agriculture. Far from it, because actually the biggest investors in agriculture are smallholder farmers. What we are seeing is that these investments are not to the benefit of these primary investors in agriculture. And that instead what we would want is to see that public service infrastructures are given to these communities, that the investments are done for these communities so that they can themselves be the leaders in the economic growth and the type of development that they want to see for themselves. it is very important for investors to partner with small-scale farmers, but allowing them to utilize their own methods, develop their infrastructure, and reach markets, but the investors cannot be the drivers of this